Hello and welcome to this blank fucking wall. So I've read 13 books in August. Time flies fast once you don't have a job, what can I say? So technically I've read Jade City, then Big Swiss, then Jade War, but let's group the Jades together for later and start with Big Swiss. Our main character, Greta, lives in a small town and transcribes therapy sessions for this sex therapist that everyone in this town seems to go to. And she gets really attached to this specific client whom she nicknames Big Swiss, because she's tall and she's Swiss. And then one day she recognizes Big Swiss's voice out in the wild and they sort of start a relationship, with Big Swiss being none the wiser that our main character knows a lot of personal stuff about her. This was a fast read. It had some funny scenes, but to me the best thing about this book was the house the main character lives in. This decrepit old building that has so much going on. The house just had a lot of character. Funny, I cannot say the same thing about the actual characters. So I had two main issues with this book. First of all, because of the humor and the way the characters are written, I was unable to get attached to them. And even though the characters are unlikable, I didn't hate them. I didn't find them annoying. They just felt so distant. The story will flow much better as a TV show, I think. Good luck, Jodie. My second and biggest issue is some jokes were questionable. Here are some examples. These bees seem Japanese. Said Greta. There's something kamikaze about the way they're crashing into shit. What happened to your face? You look like you've been beaten up. Your eyes are almost swollen shut. Greta shrugged. You should have seen me out there. I turned Italian. I turned Chinese. And then I started menopause. And even if we didn't have any of the previous ones, this one would still stop me in my tracks, okay? The dog looked like it had given up being a dog a long time ago. It wasn't even going through the motions. I've never seen a more depressed animal in all my life, not even in India. I have read this at like 2 a.m. and I was like, is she insinuating that the dogs in India are depressed because they're in India? After reading this, I've genuinely Googled, are dogs sad in India ? And granted, I did find out that unfortunately India has a lot of homeless dogs. But the question remains, are they depressed? If you're watching this and you're a homeless dog from India, please reach out. Then I read Jade City by Fonda Lee and the second book in the trilogy, Jade War. It's a fantasy, and in this world, people wielding jades are able to gain these magical abilities. And jade can only be found on this specific island of Kaikon. While the only people who are supposed to have jades are these trained warriors called greenbones, some other people are like, I want jade. Can I have jade? And the black market's answer is yes. We mostly follow one of the two major clan families of the island's capital city, and it's a clan war, and it only gets bigger and bigger. The world is super interesting. I have really enjoyed the first book, but after I've read the second one, I'm not really sure if I want to finish the series. Because the books are very political intrigue heavy, you mostly follow the characters, and I actively don't care about them. In order to defend myself, I need to talk spoilers, so alert, alert! DJ Crazy Times! Major spoilers for the first two books in the Greenbone saga. Skip to this timestamp to avoid them. Have you left? Okay. So when I said I didn't care about the characters, I lied. During the first book, I have really enjoyed Lan as a character. I have really liked following his point of view. Of course, he fucking dies in book one, so And then we're left with Hilo, Shay, and Andon. I tolerated Hilo in book one, but after he kills Lan's ex-wife and takes her son, I despised him after that. And obviously it's a clan war. I don't expect the characters to be heroic, but we spent so much time with Hilo because he's our new pillar, and I detest him. He mainly pisses me off because I have now read two books and his stance on what it means to be a green bone has not changed at all. He continues to be very stubborn and set in his ways. And Shay could be a favorite, but she's written in such a way that I just don't care. She gets some really interesting scenes in book 2, although I really hated the sudden pregnancy trope. Yet she still feels so detached. I'm just mad because Lan was just perfectly in the middle, and Hilo and Shay are like on the opposite sides of that spectrum. And after Lan dies, we lose our only sensible, open-minded character. And we get stuck with Hilo. I will say Andon's point of view was like the only saving grace of Jade War for me. Him and Barrow, if you told me after I finished the first book that Barrow's point of view would be my favorite, I would call you a liar. What can I say? The sheer luck on that bitch fascinates me. Honestly, at this point, I am most interested in the Pillar of the Mountain clan. I want to know more about her. Then I have read The Inimitable Jeeves. Basically, I had a physical book, I was spending a couple of days at the beach and I needed something light. In case you don't know, in this series of novels we follow Bertie Wooster and his valet, Jeeves. Bertie is a dumbass, and he constantly finds himself in very unfortunate scenarios, and Jeeves has to save his ass. Different hijinks ensue. I have read one of the other books before, but this one didn't have like a definite plot throughout. It was more like lots of shorter stories bound together. It was fine. It did what I wanted it to do, which was to entertain me for a few hours. Then we have the 22 Murders of Madison May. The story starts when Madison, a realtor, a real estate agent. She's alone at an open house and this strange guy shows up, acts really weird, says, "I love you in every world," and proceeds to kill her. And then we meet our main character, Felicity Staples, which is such a fun name. She's a journalist investigating Madison's murder, and the investigation leads to her finding out some very bizarre things. I think you could guess where this is going, with this book being sci-fi and because of the title, but I'm trying not to reveal too much. This was very run-of-the-mill sci-fi thriller. It gets the job done, but it's not mind-blowing. Mid is the best word to describe this book. And then I've read Kiss Her Once for Me. The story follows Ellie. She's an animator who moves to Portland to work at Leica Studios, and at Christmas Eve, she meets a woman named Jack, and they spend the whole day and nights together, a whirlwind romance, if you will. But something happened at the end there, and they've never spoken since. And our story begins a year later. Ellie doesn't work at Leica anymore. She's broke, she's desperate. So she and this rich landlord she barely knows hatch this marriage of convenience scheme. He needs to be married to get access to his trust fund, and Ellie just needs money. Don't we all? But when Ellie goes to spend the holidays with her new fiance's family to convince them they're in love, turns out his sister is Jack, the woman Ellie is still thinking about since that day they spent together a year ago. And newsflash, I hated this. At first it was fine, but then it just like slowly unraveled. To start with, our main character Ellie is self-pity personified. I feel like as a writer, if you go overboard, then at some point the character stops being relatable and compelling and turns insufferable. Also, I'm an anxious person myself, but while I was reading this book, I felt like I don't want to be in this mindset. It's too much. For me, reading is a form of escapism, and being stuck with a very infuriating character, especially if you're reading a romance novel, is not it. I honestly think this book would have benefited greatly from having a second point of view, especially because The Charm Offensive, the other book by this author, had that. And I thought that having a second point of view really helped in establishing the connection between the characters. I also remember reading their sex scene, and while I'm not someone who loves smut, it's also not a big deal for me. So I feel like the fact that I was so immensely bored while reading their sex scene is not a good sign. The author also mentions Jack smelling like bread at least 13 times. I checked. And she also constantly mentions her having this half moon or quarter moon smile. I am begging the authors to use a thesaurus. What the fuck? Also, very slight spoiler. I don't recommend you reading this book, but like, spoiler. There's a black trans character in this book whose only purpose is to briefly appear in the beginning, then completely disappear, and to magically reappear towards the ending to save our main character and provide her a place to live. The worst book I've read this month, hands down. And then finally we have a book I liked. I've read Remarkably Bright Creatures. This was so charming. This book probably features my favorite book character of this year, a giant Pacific octopus named Marcellus. And he has a point of view, he's an active character, and I love it. So we have Marcellus, and then we have Tova, a 70-year-old woman who works the night shift as a janitor at the aquarium Marcellus is at. And they form this friendly relationship, and it's heartwarming. Tova's son mysteriously disappeared when he was 18, and Marcellus makes it his mission to help Tova to uncover what happened. And you'd probably ask me, if you enjoyed the book so much, then why did you give it 3.75 stars instead of 4? Well, it's because we also follow Cameron, a 30-year-old man-child from California who goes on this quest to find his dad. Cameron is very whiny and very annoying. Oh my god, my dad abandoned me. Bitch, get in line. I don't really get why the author made Cameron the way he is. He could have still remained unlikable, but he did not have to be this shitty in order for the story to work. Especially because the other points of view were so whimsical and heartfelt. But overall, I love this book. It made me feel these things called emotions, you know? And I would die for Marcellus. Then I randomly read Killing Me. I don't really remember where I found this book. Maybe I was browsing the new releases at my library on Libby or something. This is an adventurous thriller where our main character Amber is kidnapped by a serial killer. And this is not a spoiler, this happens on page 1. And then she's saved by this mysterious woman who, after saving Amber, wants nothing to do with her. And the thing is, our main character, she has some secrets, so she has to run away to Vegas. And then another stuff starts going down and we go from there. This book is dark but funny. I have really enjoyed our main character. This book kind of reminds me of Poker Face with Natasha Lyonne, because Amber, our main character, is also on the run. She also has some special skills that come in handy, and she encounters this assortment of interesting characters while she's in Vegas. I didn't give it a high rating because the last third of the book kinda dragged, but all in all, it was a good time. Then I have read Pines, the first book in the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. I have read this in one sitting. It was so fast-paced, it was incredible. We follow an agent who has been sent to investigate the disappearance of 2 other agents in this small town called Wayward Pines. And once our main character gets there, it becomes clear that something is not right and the people are acting weird. If you want to get out of a reading slump and you want to read something that's just like go, 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 this book is perfect for that. It's this action-packed thriller. I also know that there's a TV show, have not seen it. And the author said that he was inspired by Twin Peaks, but I don't find them similar beyond that an agent goes to a small town to investigate synopsis. I will say that towards the ending the story kind of dragged and I was not the biggest fan of the reveal, but I think that you can just read the first book and stop there. There's no massive cliffhanger. Maybe I'll continue the series, maybe not. We'll see. And then I finally got I Who Have Never Known Men from my library. I've been waiting for this one for so long. It's a short dystopian novel about 40 women that were imprisoned and put in this bunker, and they have been living there since, constantly watched and guarded by these men. Our main character is the youngest there. We follow the story from her point of view, and she was kidnapped at such a young age that she doesn't remember the life before the imprisonment. And then one day, the women are suddenly free, and The rest is spoilers. This is a very reflective, slow to medium paced novel. And out of all the books I've read this month, I can definitely see this one being someone's absolute favorite book ever. And while I enjoyed the themes covered in this novel, sadly by this point I think I've just consumed too many dystopian and post-apocalyptic stories. So this one just didn't hit. And that's not the book's fault in the slightest, especially because it came out in 1995 and was definitely way ahead of its time. It's a shame that from what I gather, it went unnoticed by the masses for a long time. It's a book I would definitely recommend to other people. It just didn't affect me profoundly how I expected it to. Then I picked up Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I started reading it on my Kindle, but then I found out that my library had an available copy of an audiobook, so I listened to the rest of it on audio. The story is set in 2007 and we follow Cleo. She's in her early 20s and she's an artist who left England to study in New York. And a few months before her visa expires, she meets Frank, a 40-something working in advertising, and they start a relationship. They get married really fast to help Cleo with her visa, and because they genuinely become quite smitten with each other. And then we follow their relationship because, as you can guess, it turns out to not be perfect. There are multiple POVs. We follow not only Cleo and Frank, but Cleo and Frank's friends, Frank's sister, and so on. First of all, the beginning of the story, the first chapter where Cleo and Frank meet each other was great. The first chapter in the book in general reminded me of like an indie movie from the 90s with lots of artsy, depressed people in the heart of New York, you know? And although I didn't fall in love with any of the characters, I did empathize with them, and that's no easy feat. I didn't get attached to the characters, but I felt for them. And most books like this one usually fail for me in that regard. The writing was beautiful, and I also have to give credit to the audiobook narrator, Kid Griffiths, who did the audiobook solo. Some accents felt dodgy, but at one point of the book, there's a heated argument, and she acted her ass off during that. Like an Oscar-worthy performance. I felt like I was there. Unfortunately, I think having multiple POVs is what brings the book down in the end. There are just like way too many characters, and the plot loses its coherence because of that. At some point, we follow Cleo's friend Quentin, who's gay, and Frank's sister Zoe, who's half black, if I'm not mistaken, and both of them are done dirty by how quickly the story jumps from one character to the other. Zoe at least gets some character development, but Quentin is just forgotten, and it's bizarre. I wish the book would just follow Cleo, Frank, and maybe two other characters and stop at that. Also, a small gripe, but the story is supposed to be set in 2007, 2008, but the way some characters use their mobile phones rings false to me. I'm not from the United States, but no one around me back then was able to constantly send each other photos and videos that easily, so I was like confused about that. Also, if there's gonna be a TV or a movie adaptation, boy, do I have a suggestion for you.
No, darling, it's not pomegranate.
Then I have read Unnecessary Drama. I somehow missed the fact that this was YA. It's a YA romance novel set in Australia, and we follow an 18-year-old named Brooke who moves to Melbourne for college, and she has to share a house with a guy from her high school whom she really dislikes. And that's pretty much it. You could guess how the story goes. It's a romance. It was fine. Honestly, it's on me for not noticing this was YA. And I will say the immature, annoying things the characters do make sense because they're all like 18. So I can't even complain about the characters. They're just kids. I also had the same problem with this book as with Kiss Her Once for Me, with the main characters like anxiety, but it was not as bad. I just wish we saw more of Melbourne in this book. It's such a unique setting for a romance novel, but it goes nowhere. And the last book I've read in August was My Roommate is a Vampire.
And they were roommates.
Spoiler, this is the best book I've read this month, and trust me, no one is more surprised by that than me. First of all, the book's title is kinda giving me Chuck Tingle. My roommate is a vampire, and he pounds me in the ass. So our main character, Cassie, needs a place to live. And she finds this ad on Craigslist from someone renting out a room in a beautiful apartment, and the rent is only $200. So Cassie is immediately like, something's not fucking right here. But she's desperate, so she decides to check it out. Surprise! The apartment is real and beautiful, even though the decor could use some work. Looks like something from a different century. And the owner of the apartment, Frederick, is very polite and really attractive, but also kind of weird. But because his only condition for a potential roommate is for them to never enter his bedroom and this one other room, Cassie's like, I'm in. So she moves in, and later something happens, and she realizes what her new roommate's secret is. This book is so funny. The premise itself is hilarious. I was reading it with a huge grin glued to my face. A giggle would escape me occasionally, and I truly do not remember the last time that happened. If you ask me, then having a centuries-old vampire for a roommate sounds like a dream. Polite, sexy, doesn't go to bed at 10 p.m., could kill you. Sign me up! And I have really liked our main characters, and even though the last third or so of the book could be better, I don't care. I had so much fun. I'm giving it 4 stars. Loved it. So there you go. 13 books I read in August. I hope I find a job in September. Goodbye! 3 books on this list feature extensive mentions of Taylor Swift. Kiss Her Once for Me, Unnecessary Drama, and My Roommate is a Vampire. The authors of Kiss Her Once for Me and Unnecessary Drama even thank Taylor Swift in their acknowledgements. Is Taylor Swift our new god?